Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. To all those joining from around the world, we'd love to wish you a very happy International Day of Human Spaceflight. Though this is not a crewed mission that we are covering this evening, today does mark the anniversary of the day that the first human did go into space, Yuri Gagarin. Also, the anniversary of STS-1, the very first space shuttle mission launching from here in Florida. Tonight, though, we have a Starlink flight on tap, set to go up T-minus 58 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, of course, running the technical operations of the broadcast this evening. Our Adam Bernstein out and about to track the rocket this evening, also doing some still photography tonight. Our Michael Kane is also going to be popping into the live chat, so be sure to tell him hello. And if you're not already following our photography team on their social channels, you can find Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. You can find Spaceflight Now simply by searching at Spaceflight Now. We're around on X, of course, as well as Threads, Facebook, and where you're visiting with us right now on YouTube. We should also have some tracking assistance tonight from our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. In the center of your screen is the Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX, the workhorse vehicle of the company, in the center of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We're now T-minus 56 minutes, 40 seconds, and counting away from the 25th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites this year alone. SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff of the Falcon 9 tonight at 9:22 p.m. Eastern. For our friends joining us from around the world, that is 0122 UTC. Certainly appreciate the 1,400 of you that are joining with us live at this early stage of our coverage this evening. If you haven't already, and as you're settling in, be sure to hit the like button, share the stream to allow more folks to find this live coverage. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now here on YouTube. It's free and easy to do so. And when you do, click the bell icon and turn on all notifications. That way you get alerted whenever we start these live streams. You don't miss a beat. Also, you'll be alerted when new videos drop. Now is a good time to subscribe to Spaceflight Now, as we are less than a month away from the launch of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft on its first crewed mission, speaking of human spaceflight. Butch Wilmore, Sonny Williams heading up to the International Space Station, currently targeting liftoff from Pad 41 over at Cape Side on March 6th, setting up for a docking at the ISS on March 8th. We have quite a bit of coverage between now and then, and we'll have some pretty robust day of launch coverage as well. We would love to have you along for the ride, and if you're subscribed to Spaceflight Now, you can see that coverage as it comes about. We're also powered by a very wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, so thanks to folks like Cappy Cross, Callistia Lee, Cats in the House, which is a great handle, Miles High, Annette P, Glenn A, JC Martinez, Mirage, Count to Money, another great handle, and a whole bunch more. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and the ability to watch all of our Cape-based launches in 4K. And perhaps I misspoke a second ago. I did mean they'll be launching the CFT, the crew flight test mission, will be launching in May, on May 6th. Not sure if I said something else, but May 6th is the current target date. Also want to thank our wonderful moderators for helping out in the live chat. Really appreciate all of you guys for helping us keep things moving smoothly and allowing people to have a good conversation as we continue on with the count. As we're getting things started, I want to thank Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful channel members, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships, getting us off on a good foot with some generosity there. Really appreciate that, Callistia. And if you're one of our newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank Callistia in the chat if you haven't already. Last but not least, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature if you have a comment or question, or if you'd just like to be supportive like one of our channel members, Christopher Jones. Good to see you again this evening, sir. And with that is an oft-asked question, and so let's go ahead and get this started tonight with a little trajectory chat as we are now T-minus 52 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. The Falcon 9 rocket going to be lifting off from Slick 40, Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once it leaves the pad, it will fly in a southeasterly trajectory, heading east of the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage booster will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships, and tonight, the one they have on deck is a shortfall of gravitas. A little bit further downrange of the map, the payload fairings will be jettisoned as well and recovered by one of SpaceX's 2 East Coast recovery vessels, and tonight the one they're using is Doug. Of course, it and the other vessel, Bob, named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo of the Demo 2 mission, kicking the commercial crew program for NASA into high gear with the first human spaceflight of that mission. And the crew flight test of Starliner will now give, or will soon give, I should say, NASA a second crew vehicle that can ferry its astronauts to and from the International Space Station. As I was just mentioning, the fairing halves, this is an image of what that process looks like as they float down toward the either Atlantic or Pacific Ocean waters, glide down under parachutes and are scooped up by a recovery vessel. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery, as noted in this slide here from a company presentation earlier in the year. SpaceX, in fact, just started the process of using flight-proven payload fairings on national security missions, starting with the launch of the USSF 62 flight just yesterday. That mission featured payload fairings for a flight. While that mission went off from the West Coast, the fairings actually flew for the first time over here on the East Coast, supporting the launch of a Falcon Heavy mission that was USSF 52, otherwise known as the 7th and most recent flight of the X-37B spaceplane. Currently still on orbit. Last time that spaceplane went up, it stayed in its orbital plane for more than 900 days before returning for a landing at the launch and landing facility managed by Space Florida. TBD how long the spaceplane will remain up in orbit this time around. Here's another image of what the recovery process looks like, scooping those fairings out of the ocean waters. Of course, it's not simply a matter of how many times a payload fairing has flown as to whether and how it is reused, but it's also the conditions under which it flew and the shape it's in when it is recovered. We're now T-minus 49 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. We're just about 10 minutes, about 11 minutes actually, away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director would nominally make the call on the start of propellant load. If they are in a good position to get things started, though, they can make that pulling call a little bit ahead of time. But the fueling process remains the same, so let's go ahead and pivot to that, let you know what the countdown process is going to be like as we continue on through the next 48.5 minutes. As mentioned, that T-minus 38 is when that call on prop load happens. If the go-ahead is given, fueling starts with RP1 being loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the rocket. RP1, just another term for rocket-grade kerosene. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage. The T-minus 16-minute mark, LOX load happens on the second stage, but before that comes about, at roughly T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, we'll see the so-called big vent as the fueling lines are chilled at the strong back. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract begin. Starts with the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion, clearing the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, LOX load should be wrapped up on the Falcon 9 first stage. 2 minutes to liftoff, the same is true of the second stage. And at that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. SpaceX fuels its rocket in a manner known as load and go, fueling practically to the point right before they lift off, which is the reason why, as fueling has begun, they are committing to that T0 and they do not have the option or opportunity to hold once fueling has started. In the final 60 seconds of the countdown, the control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director gives their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 at T0. Again, targeting 9:22 p.m. Eastern, 01:22 UTC, or in 46 minutes and counting. T-minus 45 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Kind of leapfrogged over the weather, if you may have noticed that. Not an intentional passing by, but in fact the weather really not much of a watch item today, as the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a greater than 95% chance of favorable weather for liftoff, with the only concern being the liftoff winds and the upper level wind shear being tracked as between low and moderate levels. So generally speaking, that's just about as good as you can get. Really the only better is the 24-hour turnaround, which obviously we don't want to see a scrub. That is not optimal for anybody. But in the event that SpaceX would need to target a 24-hour turnaround, the launch window on Saturday, April 13th opens up at 9:04 p.m. Eastern, 01:04 UTC, and the weather also greater than 95% go. And the primary concerns, and this is a rare thing to see, none. There are no primary concerns for a 24-hour turnaround, not even cumulus clouds, which is kind of remarkable. Sounds like a good beach day to me. Also, as just a point of note, SpaceX is running its countdown for this mission from its Hangar X site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights. This is the case with the very sooty vehicle that you see here on your screen. SpaceX preparing to launch a Falcon 9 booster for a 20th time tonight. That's a first. And hopefully will be successful as they're pushing the bounds of reusability. As company leaders have said, they test the outer limits of their vehicles on these Starlink flights. So if you want to see the most dynamic things from the flight leaders, look for the Starlink flights. T-minus 42 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Just taking a look back at the live chat here. I want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Nelson Reyes. Good to see you again this evening, sir. And our thanks to you for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that. And to our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Nelson in the live chat. We hope you appreciate your time as a channel member. As just a reminder, when you are gifted a channel member, I believe it lasts for a month. So if you do enjoy being a channel member and you like those perks, you can go ahead and look at the options for continuing on with channel memberships, and we'd love to have you as an ongoing part of our membership community. Speaking of channel members, Josh King with a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Josh. Thank you so much for that. Josh asking, is Sierra Space's Dream Chaser spaceplane bigger or smaller than the X-37B? That is a good question. I personally have not had the good fortune of seeing the X-37B with my own eyes. Adam and I did travel up to Sandusky to see the Dream Chaser spaceplane, and it is quite sizable. I don't have the specs of the two of them right at my fingertips, so I don't want to give you bad information, but I believe the Dream Chaser is slightly bigger. As Steven is reminding me, as far as the length, they both fit inside Falcon 9 payload fairings, so one would not be dramatically longer than the other. Sorry, that would be Vulcan that will be flying Dream Chaser, not Falcon, for now at least. But the Dream Chaser's wings also do need to fold up in order to fit inside the payload fairings. That is, I don't believe, the case with the X-37B. In the meantime, we're just about a minute and a half away from the call on the start of prop load. We do have some video to roll here from the run-up to this mission that you see here. This is the same booster that you see in a vertical position on the right-hand side of your screen in that live box. This is 1062 in the SpaceX fleet, rolling out to Pad 40 ahead of this mission. Not an uncommon thing to see SpaceX boosters rolling by here at the press site. But this will be the first time we see a booster rolling on its way to its 20th mission. And even that won't be that much of a news item rolling on down the road. I believe SpaceX has 2 other boosters that have reached 19 flights, if I'm not mistaken. Though this booster will be joined as the flight leader likely in the not too distant future. Right about this point, SpaceX launch director will be taking that poll in the startup prop load. And hopefully we will get word from SpaceX that fueling has begun. But as we await that point, and again, fueling will start at the T-minus 35-minute mark. But what you want to look for, if you see just to the right of the Falcon 9 rocket, there's the crew access tower. And if you see those white lights along the right-hand side of the tower, and if you go up 1, 2, 3 white lights, and then bring your eyes left to the booster itself, and you see that slightly lighter gray band near the base of the booster, that's the point where we'll start to see some vapor and a little bit of frost forming as the super cold liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage LOX tank. And that'll be a good visual indication that fueling has in fact begun, if we have not yet heard word from SpaceX at that point. We usually start to see some evidence of fueling about at the T-minus, I'd say 33-minute mark, once you've had a couple minutes of fueling. T-minus 35 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. I want to thank another channel member, Valerie Jones, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Valerie. And I will echo her sentiments, saying, hit that like button so the algorithm pushes this video up to more people. Yes, if you are among the 5,100 who have not hit the like button on this video, that would be very much appreciated if you could do that for us and allow more folks to find this live coverage as we continue on through the count. As mentioned, this will be the 25th launch of Starlink satellites this year for SpaceX. Here's a coverage map as it currently stands. Most recently, the company added Albania as a customer. More than 70 countries around the world have access to the Starlink internet service at this point. The darker blue shaded countries are ones where service is either pending or will be activated in the near-ish future. Countries in gray are where Starlink service is not available. There are 23 Starlink satellites on board this flight, again, the 25th in this year. Each of them clocking in at about 1,760 pounds or 80 kilograms. With the solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers, as opposed to the previously used, slightly more expensive Krypton Hall thrusters. They were built in Redmond, Washington, near Seattle. They'll be deployed at about 200 miles or 320 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. We're now T-minus 33 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX should be a couple minutes, or about a minute and a half or so, into the fueling process. We have not received direct word from SpaceX that fueling has started, but again, we'll look for those signs of fueling that we mentioned before. Signs of vapor, you see that light gray ring that I mentioned. That's where we'll keep a close eye out for signs of vapor, a little frost ring forming there. As we await and watch, want to thank Jack Wagner for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Jack. Really appreciate that. Chicken in from Alaska. T-minus 32 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. I want to thank Josh King for another $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate that support. And Josh asks, will the Falcon Heavy ever fly from Pad 40, or is that just a 39A exclusive? As far as we know, the Falcon Heavy will likely only fly on the East Coast from Pad 39A. There has been talk of plans for Falcon Heavy capabilities from out on the west coast of Vandenberg Space Force Base. And Stephen can correct me in my ear if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that is also part of a condition of being able to compete for the National Security Space Launch Phase 3 contracts, is being able to have eventually Falcon Heavy capabilities from the west coast as well as the east coast, so that SpaceX is able to launch into all of the orbital regimes that are requested by Space Systems Command, part of the U.S. Space Force. Yes, as he was just reminding me that they're in the process of acquiring Slick 6 over at Vandenberg, which will not only have Falcon 9 capabilities, but will also be outfitted to support Falcon Heavy launches. Also worth noting, as part of the NSSL requirements, SpaceX will need to have the ability to both horizontally and, more importantly, vertically integrate payloads as part of the Phase 3 contract. And so that capability likely coming to Slick 6, maybe at some point coming to one of the pads here in Florida. We'll have to watch and wait to see that. We're now T-minus 30 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, assuming all is moving on track, SpaceX will be loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. That same process will also happen on the second stage at about the T-minus 25 minute mark. We are not seeing the signs of fueling that we would have expected this deep into the count. They may be adjusting the T0 time. SpaceX does have opportunities until 12:48 a.m. Eastern today. And we do have official word that the new T0 is in fact shifting to the right. It is now 9:40 p.m. Eastern. 0140 UTC. We are resetting our countdown clock. Stand by. We'll be back in just a moment. countdown clock reset. We are now at T-minus 46 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. So we are about 8 minutes now from the point at which they will make this call on prop load tonight. And again, if there are additional adjustments, we will let you know. We are currently T-minus 42 minutes and counting. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank a few more folks for their support as we continue to roll on through our coverage of the Starlink 6-49 mission tonight. Want to thank Mouse the German for a €6 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mouse. Saying greetings from Germany. I love and value the technology, but how will the world ever deal with the debris in space for future generations? Well, both the European Space Agency and NASA are looking at ways to tackle the issue of space debris. That is something that is obviously of great importance to the health and success of not only the satellites that are all around in multiple orbits around the Earth, but of course to the humans that are flying in space. One way that SpaceX looks at this problem is after it deploys its payload, in this case the Starlink satellites, there will be a third and final burn of the Falcon 9 upper stage engine, the Merlin vacuum engine, that will push it into a graveyard orbit so it will burn up and to not create additional space debris. And in fact, just earlier this week, NASA rolled out what it calls the first part of its so-called integrated space sustainability strategy, looking at ways to be more or increasingly more responsible in orbit. I'll go ahead and throw a link to that if you'd like to do some light reading as we continue on through the count. Put that in the live chat here. And there are companies and other agencies that are looking for ways to further clean up space debris, whether it is essentially acting as tugs to bring older defunct satellites out of their current position and into a place where they can burn up in the atmosphere, or potentially refuel satellites so as they get on in age, they don't themselves become space debris but can continue on in their mission. So there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to the ongoing problem of orbital debris. It is complex and multifaceted, not to mention the great variety of sizes of debris. So, if you have something much larger like a rocket upper stage versus a defunct satellite versus a piece of a satellite, like when we were talking about the launch of the latest military weather satellite, the WSFM, that launched yesterday as a replacement for older military weather satellites, some of which over the 2000s and 2010s broken up on orbit. Those created much smaller fragments of orbital debris, and it is difficult to find ways to capture and safely contain those. And for now, there isn't a great solution to that, but that is something that a lot of companies are increasingly working on different and creative ways to solve that problem. So, long-winded answer. Again, I put a link in the live chat here to NASA's latest unveiled strategy of how they're working to tackle the problem. So, hope that answers your question, Mouse, and for any other folks that have questions about orbital debris. We're now T-minus 36 minutes, 55 seconds and counting here on this Starlink mission. We are once again about just under 2 minutes from the point at which SpaceX should start fueling this Falcon 9 rocket, if in fact they are in position to do so. As a reminder, once again, if SpaceX needs and they have not started fueling, they have backup opportunities through this window until 12:48 a.m. Eastern, 04:48 UTC. Hopefully they will not need that full length of the window, but it is available to them should it come up. Taking a look back at the live chat, want to thank Ruth Laral, Ruth Laral, excuse me. Apologies if I mispronounced your name, Ruth, but appreciate the super chat and the kind words saying great coverage. Thank you. Joining us from north of Tampa. Hopefully you've got clear enough skies that once this Falcon 9 rocket launches tonight, you'll be able to see this. Also want to thank Jeffrey Bew for a $10 super chat. Thank you, sir. Who says feeling guilty? Not sure why feeling guilty. There's no reason to feel guilty about loving this channel. He says, keep up the good work, guys. I'm a space nerd from the Apollo days. SpaceX has gotten me excited about the future of space travel again. Well, it's always great to hear about the things that kindle folks' interest in space exploration, and we love to be emissaries of getting to see how these rockets work and launch and bring those opportunities to you. For those who just want some additional context, if you're in Central Florida and can see it for yourself, or if you're elsewhere in the world and we are your eyes and ears to be able to bring this coverage to you. It is our privilege. And thanks also to Andrew Cochran for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Andrew. Saying from Connie and Paul watching in North Carolina. Lovely to have the Carolinas on board. We're now T-minus 34 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. At this point, fueling should be underway on the Falcon 9 rocket again, assuming SpaceX did make the call to go ahead and start fueling tonight. Hopefully we will get confirmation